Someone once said, a coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. Drew Sherman puts it this way: I love stories that include the phrase, "it just so happened," because that's a clue God is up to something. This summer, Drew and Michelle Sherman will celebrate 20 years in ministry at Compass Christian Church in Dallas, Texas. When the two were growing up in Brazil, Indiana, neither ever saw themselves in ministry, but it just so happened that Michelle's grandmother was a pastor's wife. She watched her grandma serve alongside her grandpa, the preacher, every Sunday, and it shaped young Michelle. She says, I had no idea at the time, but God was preparing me to do the same thing myself someday. Drew certainly didn't see a pulpit in his future. He was good at math and science, so when he graduated from high school, he decided to be a pharmacist and enrolled at Purdue University. But as his father drove him to Purdue to move in, it just so happened that a heavy rainstorm forced them to pull off on the side of the road. Drew's dad used the opportunity to turn and ask his son an important question. Drew, I just want to make sure, is this what you want to do with your life? Counting pills? I'm okay with it if you're okay with it. In that moment, God was up to something because Drew began to cry. No, he said, I don't think I am okay with it. Well, said his dad, your mom and I always thought you'd be in ministry. Today, Drew says, I think my earthly father was sharing with me the will of my heavenly Father. I was never supposed to be a pharmacist. I'm so ADD, I would have ended up like Mr. Gower in It's a Wonderful Life, giving out the wrong medicine. I would have killed somebody by now. I was meant to be a preacher. So Drew's father ended up turning the car around, and they never made it to Purdue. Instead, in January of 1985, Drew enrolled at Ozark Christian College, and Michelle would follow him to Ozark later that fall. Both soon discovered what Drew's parents had already seen. Ministry really was the right fit. During his student days, Drew served as children's minister at Sunnybrook Christian Church in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and after graduation, he and Michelle, married by then, moved to Mount Pleasant, Indiana to serve as student minister at Greenwood Christian Church. They served under Reggie Epps, and it just so happened that Reggie had a brother-in-law in California named Dudley Rutherford. It wasn't long before Dudley recruited Drew to be his student minister at Hillcrest Christian Church in Porter Ranch, California, and that experience would prove to be life-changing. Their sons, Luke and Landon, were born in California, joining big sister Hannah to fill out the Sherman family, and those kids became Michelle's congregation as she taught and discipled them, and the Hillcrest Church, where Drew served, was also growing. The lessons he learned there were formative. I was there 9 years, says Drew, and the church grew from 500 to 5,000 as they became Shepherd of the Hills Church. To see a church grow tenfold was a crucial learning experience for me, says Drew, because eventually that's almost exactly what happened when I came here to Compass. We had 860 in worship my first Sunday here, and 20 years later, this past Christmas, we welcomed 8,800 people, growth tenfold. Ironically, Drew almost didn't go to Compass in Dallas. In 2002, he wanted to move into preaching ministry and was talking with the church in Colorado, but he decided to explore one more option. He called former OCC President Ken Eidelman to ask if he knew of any other openings, and Ken replied, well, it just so happens that I preached at a church in Dallas this morning looking for a preacher. You might just be the guy. Drew and Michelle moved to Dallas in 2002, and the first 3 years at Compass, says Drew, were the hardest 3 years of his life. The church was facing challenges. 1,200 people joined the church in those first 3 years, but their attendance only went up 300 because they also lost so many people. Drew would come home almost every day and ask Michelle, can we go somewhere else? But God kept them there, and Drew kept preaching and kept leading, and Michelle started opening up their home each month for what they called the new member gathering. She and Drew loved seeing the church start to grow, but they didn't want to get too busy to get to know all the new people. So each month, they invited anyone who had been baptized or joined Compass to come to their house for dinner. At such a big church, many were surprised to get an invitation to the pastor's house, but Michelle and Drew loved doing it. And now, years later, they've hosted almost 4,000 people in their home. Drew says, Roger Storms once told me that if you love your people, they will love you back. And as Drew and Michelle have loved the people God sent their way, it just so happens that the church has flourished. Today, at their 4 campuses, Compass Christian Church baptizes hundreds each year. Over the last few years, they've paid off $10 million of medical debt for over 5,000 folks in their local counties. Last year alone, they packed 1 million meals for families in Haiti, and they had 91,000 live streams of their weekend services as people tuned in from all around the world to hear the good news of Jesus. Last year, to expand global missions in their own outreach, Compass also launched a $44 million campaign called Unstoppable. They asked their consulting company about other churches launching campaigns in the midst of the pandemic, but their company told them, "You're the only one." So Drew preached through the book of Acts, the unstoppable march of the church from Jerusalem to the ends of the earth, and it just so happened that Compass caught the vision. They met their goal, and in the midst of a global pandemic, Compass unleashed a global gospel push. It's no coincidence that under Drew and Michelle, the ministry of Compass has grown, and that young man who once wanted to be a pharmacist now leads a healthy, flourishing church. God has been up to something, and we celebrate Drew and Michelle's kingdom leadership. On behalf of Ozark Christian College, thank you, Drew and Michelle, for loving Christ Church, for preaching and teaching, for evangelizing and shepherding, and for advancing the gospel in Texas and around the world. Well done, good and faithful servants.